Hello, Cornerstone Church. Pastor Phil coming to you on day 8 of our 21 days of prayer and fasting as we begin the year 2020 and look for God to do great and amazing things in each of our lives, in our family, in our church, in our community, and in our world. It's a big vision there, and I know it's the first time I've thrown that out there. But that's really what we're here for. That's what we're trying to do. This 21 days of prayer, we're trying to start this year off in a really great way with God, walking with God, acknowledging God, experiencing God, being led by God, having a better understanding of what His agenda is so that we can walk in line with His agenda and pray in line with His agenda. And the end result of that in all senses is fruitfulness in our lives. We want to see God do great things. And I hope that we have that in front of us as a vision, as a prayer concern. That's what we want. We want to see God do great things. We want to see Him reveal Himself to us more. We want to see the resurrection power of Jesus more. So this 21 days is just to try and jumpstart the year 2020 in a Godward direction, in line with God's agenda. And I have more of a testimony this morning to share with you than anything else, or this evening, or whenever you're watching this. And it's a testimony of God's faithfulness. It's a testimony of God's provision and God's providence, God's glory and majesty. Because the theme for day 8 is call upon the one who said, pray without ceasing. And the text that he uses is Luke 18, 1 through 8. If you're a part of Cornerstone Church, if you were in church yesterday, you know that this is the text that we looked at for our Sunday sermon. And what I found amazing about this was I picked the text for this Sunday sermon before I saw the theme for day 8 of our day. And so all of this was unbeknownst to me. And then I looked at day 8 and I saw the theme and I realized it was going to be the day after I preached the sermon. And I just thought, look at how God works things together. Without our knowing, without our even being aware sometimes, God works things together. And so I want to stop and say, just think about that. I hope and I pray that you've experienced some of that in your life, that you've experienced some of God's majesty, some of God's providence, some of God working things out where you say, I don't have any idea how He did that, and yet He did that. Now, this is a silly example in some ways. It's really kind of a trivial circumstance, and I can certainly see people writing this off to coincidence that it just happened to be that the theme for day 8 would be the same theme that we used on day 7 in the Sunday sermon at the church. But in my heart still, it made me think about God's glory and God's majesty and God's power. Certainly we've seen that in bigger ways in our lives. I mean, I look back on our lives as a family and the way God provided for us miraculously at times. There was no real way that I can explain how we had the things that we had, how we got a house, how we, got vehicles at different times. I mean, God just provided so supernaturally throughout the life of our family that it really has always been amazing and just a thing for us to sit back and just kind of wonder at. And I get a small sense of that today, and I just want to encourage you. I hope that you have experienced some of God's wonder in your life. And if not, then ask God to show Himself to you in that way. Ask God to show Himself strong and mighty and just to blow your mind with some of the things that He does. Because when I think about this theme, when you experience some of that from God, some of God's wonder, some of God's majesty, then it's almost impossible not to pray without ceasing. When you see God do something big in your life, then on some level you just say, I want more of that. I want more of that. Why? What else could I possibly want than that? And that is the essence of praying without ceasing. It's wanting more of God. It's experiencing His hand in your life and saying, I want to experience that all the time. I want to feel that power. I want to experience His love. I want to see Him opening doors for me that I don't understand how they open. I want to see Him provide for me in ways that I can't possibly explain. And it's just amazing to see. And when God starts to do that kind of stuff in our lives, it really influences everything else. And then it really builds our faith so that when we go through a dry patch, or when we go through some difficulties, or when we experience trauma or trouble or whatever it may be, our knee-jerk reaction, our reflex is to go to God in prayer, is to say, God, I don't know what's happening here. I don't know what you're doing here, but I know your love for me. I've experienced your provision in my life, and I want to see that again. I want to just walk with you through this circumstance, whatever it may mean. And that is the essence of praying without ceasing in everything in our lives, that we just go to God and say, God, I want you. God, I need you. God, help me move this stone, move this mountain out of my way. Open this door that nobody else can open. And that becomes the fodder for our prayer lives. But when we experience God do great things, it's almost impossible not to pray without ceasing. So God bless you. Have a beautiful day. And I hope you experience God's direction, power, providence, provision in your life even today. In Jesus' name.